It is the 15th of the 12th, 2024. The time is 33 minutes past 10. Two items on the docket. Normally there are very many F1 threads at which we need to pull, but it's downtime, isn't it? But there are still some juicy story arcs to which we need to speak. First, I want to talk about Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes and Toto Wolff boycotting the FIA prize giving gala. And second, FLAVIO Briatore has given an interview to AMUS and he said some things which I think are worthy of note. Let me ask you this question first about Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. Is it wise for him and Toto, the boy who cried wolf, to decide to not attend the FIA prize giving gala? This isn't me saying that I don't understand the sentiment. Of course I am absolutely on board. Mohammed Ben Sulayem is a tyrant. Nobody said that more than me on the Cameron CC channel. Tick, of course. But is it wise going forward if you're competing in 2025 in a series governed, and I use the word governed loosely, by the FIA, headed up by President Mohammed Ben Sulayem, not to kiss some babies and shake some hands? Surely there is something to be said for hearts and minds if indeed you are Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton going across the pastures new in Scuderia Ferrari. I'm not sure it was a good decision to go if indeed Toto, the boy who cried wolf, and Sir Lewis Hamilton harbour aspirations of winning anything FIA related going forward. Of course, conflict of interest gate. What are you doing? How dare you issue that without evidence, Mohammed Ben Sulayem and the FIA? Of course I understand it. It makes sense as far as a sentiment perspective is concerned, but I'm just, as a Sir Lewis Hamilton fan, I am concerned. Visual, Benzi, Nisco, super concerned. But I digress. Let's talk about this Flavio thing, because that's the main piece on the docket today. Good luck to Sir Lewis and Toto, the boy who cried wolf, but both are going to need to put both foot forwards, go hard, full send. Otherwise, anytime there is a marginal call, you better believe that Mohammed Ben Sulayem and his part-time stewards will rule against Toto for Mercedes, the boys and girls at Brackley and Brixworth, and Sir Lewis Hamilton now driving for Ferrari. So FLAVIO Briatore, by the way, has said that he's something of a democratic dictator. Techier than techie things, eh? Why is he even back in Formula One? I remember that he was banned for life on the back of Crashgate. The incident, of course, at the first ever Singapore Grand Prix, where he ordered one Nelson Piquet to stack it, yeet it into the barrier to benefit his teammate Fernando Planalonso. Fernando, again, never one to pass up an invitation, went on to win that race. How is this dude back? Well, he says, Flavio, that I was never ever gone. That I was ambassador for Stefano Domenicali, head of the commercial rights holder, the FOM, and I'd worked with him on new races all the while and new marketing opportunities. I admit I missed Formula One. He said that. I had a conversation with Luca De Meo. I've known him forever. I told him that it's sad to see a former world champion, the team that was Renault, now Alpine, in this condition. And Alpine, for the avoidance of doubt, are in a state nowhere. All of the head honchos that rubber stamped the F1 program once upon a time are now no longer there, and this has to mean something, because a fish stinks from the head down. If you can't get the exec C-suite level bods on board, then how are you going to win races and therefore championships? It's a misnomer, a myth. Indeed, for Gazy, it can't happen. And getting FLAVIO Briatore on as an executive consultant or executive director, depending on who you speak to, is of course the first step in this. Now, Flavio, for the avoidance of doubt, those who weren't around then, Ron Dennis once upon a time got a $100 million fine for McLaren for, of course, stealing intellectual property, or at least possessing intellectual property from Ferrari. FLAVIO Briatore, only a couple of years later, did exactly the same thing and got zero. FLAVIO Briatore's gift in his ability to manage relationships with the senior head honcho is exactly what I've declared Toto and Lewis haven't done by not rocking up to the FIA prize giving. Indeed, they have a target on their back now. FLAVIO Briatore never will. when he did exactly what Ron Dennis had done previously and was declared found to be in possession of intellectual property of another team, McLaren in this instance. He flew directly to Monaco to kiss babies and rub backs and win hearts and minds as far as Max Mosley, the then head of the FIA, was concerned. He managed to successfully do mend bridges, exactly the thing that Ron Dennis had failed to do. That's why he got 100 million and Flavio Briatore got nothing of the Ron Dennis fine. Max Mosley then said Ron Dennis got 95 million for being an absolute douchebag, and they didn't say douchebag. The word that he used was see you next Tuesday, and for the actual thing that he did, he got 5 million. This is why F1 is a game of thrones, right? You either win or you die. In this interview, by the way, Flavio Briatore has talked about everything. He expects Alpine to be top 6 next year, now and then make podiums. But to do that, he says, we need to improve our car materially. But that should be possible, he says, because they've got more aerodynamic leeway, more ATR, more CFD, by dint of the fact that they've been finishing so low of late. And that's got to mean something. How much longer can Fernando Alonso go? AMU ask Flavio Briatore even, excuse me, because of course Flavio manages Fernando Alonso, has done all the while since his days at Renault, Benetton back in the day. Fernando's the exception. I'll be his manager of 22 years. He has money and no children. He is still hungry. If he finishes 14th, he has this incessant need to improve. He wants to finish 13th. He always wants more, does Fernando Alonso, the one that they call magic. Someone else at his age would go through the motions as if it were only about 14th place, happy, contented to just be on the grid. There are now two feelings in my chest. On one hand, I wish Fernando will make a comeback with Adrian Newey. Oh, the humanity, ladies and gents. I wish F1 were real rules and real style, please. Like we are all expecting, with that thought, Santa Claus to come down the chimney this year and deliver us our Christmas presents. Naivete is the fountain from which we are drinking, if indeed we harbour aspirations for the FI to do some serious stuff. But I digress. Auto Motorsport continues with its line of questioning as far as Flavio Briatore. He says that in 14th place in the past, it was Hamilton or Rosberg. They won 70% of all races. When it was Schumacher who joined us, he lacked experience. We put Fernando with Minardi. The question he was asked, is it the time era even in Formula One for rookies, that we have 5 starting on the grid next year, 1 at Alpine? Is the time for the veterans over? Of course, he's alluding to the fact that in previous years, a Haas, as an example, would always defer to a trusted hand in a K-Mag or a Nico Hulkenberg over promoting, let's say, I don't know, a Felipe Drogovic or a Teo Pourchaire. Now, however, by dint of the amount of time that these guys are putting into the simulator even, it seems that these F2 bods, courtesy of Ollie Behrman, Teo Pourchaire, Kimi Antonelli, they just jump in the car and they're ready to go almost. Teo Pourchaire, speaking of which, the other day was quicker in free practice in Abu Dhabi than his old mate Fernando Alonso. That tells you everything you need to know. To which Flavio Briatore responds, now it is the time for generational change, something of a paradigm shift. Therefore, Sainz is a very good driver, but when he was on the market, none of the top teams took him. Ergo, I think what F1 teams are considering is bang for their buck. Why would you pay 14 million to Carlos Sainz when you can pay Liam Lawson 1? And again, what's the difference? What's the risk-benefit analysis saying? Are you going to get an additional 19 million's worth of value out of Sainz as versus a Liam Lawson? No, these guys are looking for the next one, right? The next Max Verstappen, who, by the way, as per Flavio Briatore, didn't even have a driver's license when he started off at Toro Rosso. It's techie, this. Techier than techie things. AMUS as a publication asked Flavio Briatore, well, once upon a time you were interested in Colapinto when you'd already signed Jack Doohan. What was that about, Flavio? Flavio responds, just being Flavio, I'm interested in any driver who is fast. Colapinto surprised everybody, needed no time to get to grips with an F1 car from F2. no less. But we haven't had any contracts. But we have contracts with Gasly, Doohan and Aaron for next season. The price goes up suddenly as far as Colapinto, and suddenly we're talking about $20 or $30 million to sign him. The selection has become much larger today than when it used to be. Today there are 6 or 7 drivers in F2 and F3 who are promising. We want to focus on the ones in our academy, says Flavio Briatore, but not spread ourselves too thin. It will probably come down to just 3 drivers: Aaron, Mini and Martins. Therefore, I like the cut of Flavio Briatore's jib, because he's the dude to just get it done each and every single time. That's what he wants to do. He says, as far as instituting for the requisite infrastructure that's going to propel Alpine back to the mountaintop. He says, you don't have to be a genius to figure out where Alpine was. We were rock bottom of the barrel as far as F1 flotsam and jetsam is concerned. To get Alpine back to the top, he says we need the recipe to win with 30 to 40% less money than others. At Benetton, it was 50% less. I know this team, that's why they came back. We need to be efficient in the way that we're spending our financial resource and the way that we are working. But what about the engine, chap? Because nobody wins a world championship without their own engine, right? And Renault, we know, have already sacrificed that. Viry-Châtillon is no longer. They will take the Mercedes engine going forward. He was asked, was Flavio Briatore, executive consultant of Alpine, don't you think that Alpine loses identity even with a Mercedes engine? The French have always been proud of their products. No. Flavio responds, the French want to win. With our engine, we won't win. It's that simple. And I like that from Flavio. Proper. Happy early birthday from happy birthday, Turtle. Celebrating a birthday. I love this right around Christmas. I know somebody else who's just celebrated a birthday that's quite near and dear to my heart, but I digress. Briatore says, that's why I'm also saving money everywhere. Anything that doesn't matter, that won't gain us lap time. Flavio Briatore won't do it. You've heard the legend that is Eddie Jordan and the Formula for Success podcast talk about his pragmatic approach before, back in the early 2000s and mid 90s, that if there's not lap time in it, Flavio Briatore will bin it off without compunction. And that surely, if F1 is a thing and a sporting endeavour that repays an efficient operation, that is exactly the approach, no modus operandi that needs to be instituted. He says of expensive engineers, Adrian Newey is as expensive even as a driver. And so as far as the cost cap's concerned, surely if you're being fair across all teams, then you need to ensure that they are not excluded. Indeed, Adrian Newey's expense, as far as Aston Martin, needs to be included in the cost cap. Can't be doing all this consultancy and then point their cost at a non-F1 entity. That's not fair, says Flavio Briatore. And as far as signing Adrian Newey, he was asked, why didn't you go for him? You went for everybody else. You went for Carlos. You tried to sign Colapinto. Why not Adrian Newey if indeed you are invested in building yourself a car capable of winning championships? Flavio Briatore responds, mate, you have to ask Adrian Newey that. He's an artist and I don't think we're ready. We have the infrastructure requisite to sign somebody like him yet, to benefit from him. He says, and I quote, you need to have the right team around him. Maybe we'll be ready in 2 or 3 years. That's why I never seriously talked to him. AMUS says, why don't you want to be a team principal yourself? Flavio says, why? I've been in that for too long already. That's something that I don't want to revisit. Briatore says, you need the right people to get Alpine back to the mountaintop. You need the right people in the right positions, as we know already, because friend of the channel, Peter Wins, has told us that already on a gazillion occasions, that your success in Formula One will always be a function of your ability to attract and keep good people. Flavio reiterates that. You need the right people, he says, quote, in leadership positions. They can do whatever they want in their area as long as they deliver results. If not, I step in. I'm a democratic dictator. I trust people as long as they return that trust to me. If they are bad, I replace them. Bad people infect everybody that works underneath them. The organization, therefore, by osmosis, per se, then say to themselves, why would I work for somebody who is worse than me? mention no names in brackets, one Mohammed Ben Sulayem, head of the FIA. I suspect that's why there's been a plethora, a deluge even, of people leave that organisation. But I digress. With me, says Flavio, there are clear and simple management structures. As team principal, we have Oliver Oakes because he is young and motivated and he has motorsport experience. Briatore continues, it's certainly a different ball game to run a Formula One team now than it was before, particularly for Ollie Oakes stepping up from an F2 team. Different entities, right? Different challenges, both in their breadth and depth, their dimensions and parameters. You became world champion with Benetton in your career and made Renault world champion in the 2000s. MUS asks, is the situation today comparable to back then? Flavio Briatore says it is comparable to 2002, but with Alpine we're in a better position than then. It's techie, this. It is techie. I hate summer. Adelaide weather is good. Oh, MS, stay cool, man. It's techie. I love summer. It depends on where we are in the world, right? Listen, we'll diatribe for all of this later, but I wanted to bring forth this Flavio Briatore news. So to the conversation about Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff and whether they did the right thing in taking a stand from a social good perspective, and whether that outweighs the moralistic or the performance downside even that they can expect whenever there is a close decision and we have part-time stewards in F1. I will say this for the avoidance of doubt. I'm glad that we've got a go-getter like Flavio Briatore back in F1. The sport needs more people, more colourful personalities like that. We can't all be buttoned up and straight-laced. Do you know what I mean? White collar, highbrow. F1, as far as that's concerned, I think that time is over. Just like the experienced, tried F1 peddler hands. This is why we're seeing Carlos Sainz being shunned and Ollie Behrman and Kimi Antonelli being entrusted, because as at December the 15th, 2024, I feel like F1 is embarking upon a new era now, embracing social media channels, Drive to Survivation et al. The 1990s were a while ago, right? 30 years ago. This is a brand new era for Formula One. And sometimes you need an old head in a Flavio Briatore to institute for that stuff. He is that guy. And I hope dearly, I pray to the F1 gods that he can bring Alpine, formerly known as Renault, back to the F1 mountaintop, because F1 as a space will be all the better for it. But I digress.